Heather O'Rourke, who played her daughter, committed suicide, or was killed by some strange thing happened there. They said that she died from, bad flu. But I think she was tortured by her father. I think. She pulled her eyelashes out, I think. Really unhappy little girl. It's terrible. I used her as a producer. We hired her to be in one of my after-school specials, Not With My Sister, which was about teenage suicide. Sad.
The house looks just like the one next to it. And the one next to that. And the one next to that. A young couple live in it.
Give Ken a kiss.
You are so obnoxious.
With their 3 children.
Poor Ken. Honey, chew each bite 10 times.
And something more.
So this is so weird. There's an interview online of Henry Winkler. And do you know which one I'm going to talk about?
No, I don't.
So Henry Winkler gave an interview shortly after Heather died and said that, it's bizarre. Obviously, she died of a medical condition. He goes that she committed suicide. She was abused by her dad. She plucked out her eyebrows. So sad.
Henry Winkler said that?
Yes, and I've got the clip.
Heather O'Rourke, who played her daughter, committed suicide, or was killed by some strange thing happened there. They said that she died from, bad flu. But I think she was tortured by her father. I think. She pulled her eyelashes out, I think. Really unhappy little girl. It's terrible.
Now, when I went to look for it today, because I was going to play it for you on this computer that I record on, this is from 30 years ago. I can't find that. I have the clip on my computer that it's not hooked up to this podcast because I downloaded it like 2 weeks ago. But now I can't even find it online. It's so weird.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and I want to talk about something. And one of the main reasons why I do this interview was, of course, I'd like to talk to you too because you seem genuinely nice and everything. But with all the allegations coming out recently about all the abuse and all the movie stars, sexually abusing each other and everything else, there's way too much talk about Heather and Steven Spielberg and her being abused by him and all that kind of stuff. And that really was bothering me. My mom doesn't know about it. I haven't even had to read it because it was just too much. And I've been posting to some people. The people who don't live in our house, don't know who we are jumping the guns and assuming that, we just let her be abused by Steven Spielberg and did nothing about it. And it's really, I don't know why people think they could say things like that, and I understand. And Henry Winkler's one is just amazing to think that she was abused by her father and did this. But for people who just don't even know Heather at all or know us at all, 30 years later are jumping on the bandwagon of the sexual abuse being out there in the public and saying, she was abused by Steven Spielberg and da-da-da, and therefore that's what happened. She died from that. No, she didn't. And if she was abused, we wouldn't wait 15 years to say it. We'd say something then and there. We're not those kind of people. So I really wish that the people out there who do listen or can tell a friend of theirs to stop posting stuff like that because they don't know what they're talking about. And that's what really, really bothers me about the internet and people, making up stories about people they don't know anything about.
Tammy, I'm so glad, and I didn't mean for you to go there, but I'm so glad you did.
No, you're fine. I was going to go there eventually anyways with you, but I'm glad we tied it in with the Henry Winkler thing.
I'm so glad you cleared that up. It's definitely out there. And it's way too easy to read things like that. And it's sad. It really is just sad.
Mm-hmm. It is. And if I don't know you, so I wasn't putting anything about you on the internet that I didn't know was truth. And
Absolutely.
Even then I wasn't putting out there anything to slander anybody anyway. So to sit there to take a young girl who's 12 years old who passed away from a congenital disease and make up stories about how she lived her life, I don't even know who you people are. My family's very close-knit. I know everybody in my family who would know anything about us, and they wouldn't. There's no reason to put that kind of stuff out there. And the internet is forever. I mean, and you know how it is too. Your podcasts are out there forever, and everything's out there forever. So why would you want to put that out there about somebody you don't even know anything about?
Right.
You know, and to define a clip from 30 years ago, Henry Winkler, I mean, that is just amazing. That show how much you can find things from 30 years ago. And in 30 years from now, you're going to find things about Heather or, you know, or anybody, you know, that's a movie star or might have had a glimpse of some sort of stardom that talk about him as well. So, yeah. I didn't mean to take off on your interview. I'm sorry, but that was one of the main things I want to talk about. So I apologize.
I think it's really well needed. And
okay,
that's, yeah, thanks. I don't know how to recover from that.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, let's just start again.
No, it's okay. It's all right.
I could speak more about Heather, you know. I mean, what she, you know, how she was, and you know, we grew up in a trailer park for about 2 or 3 years when I was doing Tim Conway's show, and we lived in a little Ford Ranger with a camper shell, and my mom slept in a sleeping bag, and I slept in a hammock strung across them, and we spent years like that living in a trailer park, and that was probably the closest time we were ever together, and she had no problem with that. I was a fortune in Poltergeist. So she grew up, you know, very, you know, humble and very, you know, everything. She lived in an apartment in Lakeside when she died. So she wasn't a highfalutin, fancy movie star or anything. She spent many of her time living in trailers and campers and apartments and never really had anything that she was never materialistic about anything.
And she always went to school, right? Public school?
Yep, she sure did. We went to a private school for a year only because when I was working, it was easier to be in L.A. than to go back and forth. But after that, it was I was in 6th grade and she must have been in 2nd grade, I think. But after that, though, she went to public school, and she loved going to public school, and her friends loved her, and she had, you know, sleepovers, and she went trick or treating, and she, you know, did all the stuff she could do. You know, unfortunately, though, she passed away at 12, and she couldn't do, you know, anything else after that. You know, high school dances and that kind of thing. And,
right.
But she had a lot of friends, and she was just a regular kid who just. She had a job, and her job was doing movies, and then she'd come on when it was done, and she would continue on doing everything else. And when she passed away, we had 2 services because all the kids in school, they shut the school down for the day, and they had for her funeral. And everybody came to the funeral. So, and then we had the one in LA. So she was a regular kid she was just a girl. Yeah. And that's all she was. She just happened to do movies on the side. So that's how she was.
And she had a very large Cabbage Patch doll collection, right?
Yeah. Yes, she did. My mom has given some to my kids, given some to, you know, brothers and, you know, who've had children and stuff, and kind of given them off to a little bit, you know, and stuff. But for the most part, my mom's got them. I mean, and she loved Cabbage Patch dolls. And, you know, back then that craze was amazing. I mean, you know, I had them too, but of course I didn't care as much about them as she does. But, you know, she had a large Cabbage Patch collection. She loved the Cabbage Patch dolls.
And did she play sports in addition to, you know, acting?
No, she did not play any sports.
Okay.
No, she was never really into the sports. Yeah.
What about other hobbies like cooking, or you know, what else did she like to do when she wasn't on set?
She liked to bake, and she did like to do regular things like, you know, she rode a bike. When the computers finally came out, I believe it was, I want to say about 87, maybe, I'm thinking. You know, the old screen, you know, with the green screen and everything, you know. She did play, you know, Carmen Sandiego, that kind of thing. So she did like to write and be on the computer quite a bit. So she was always, you know, she liked to do that quite a bit, to write stories and that kind of stuff. And
she did mention directing, that she wanted to direct at some point. Was she creating stories that maybe she thought would be good movies or shows?
She was always, she'd get involved in one thing and then she'd forget about the story and go to another story. So she had like a lot of stories that were half written. But she really wanted to continue on in school, and Jodie Foster was one of her idols. She wanted to be a lot like Jodie Foster.
Aww.
And, you know, she wanted to continue on and do a lot of stuff. And I think to this day, you know, a lot of child stars grow up and they end up, you know, hurting themselves, or they have issues with themselves. And I believe that she would have gone on to be like Jodie Foster and made herself, you know, done something very well with herself. You know, Fred Savage has gone on to be very well. A lot of those kid stars have made a really good name for themselves and gone behind the scenes, and I think she would have been just as well as that.
I think you're right. I really do. And that says a lot about who your family is and your sister and even you. I mean, you went into the entertainment industry, you came out, went to school, and now you're a nurse, and it's a very remarkable, fun story to tell. And I'm glad that you came on here to tell it. Tammy, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Fan Counters. Is there anything else before we go that you wanted to, either talk about or anything that you can think of that would be super interesting for the listeners who are still thinking about Heather?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't know if I have much more to share because to me she was just Heather. So
right.
I don't see it as anything. I don't see it as anything exciting for you guys to know about. But like I said, she was just a regular person, and I think a lot of movie stars out there are just regular people. And but she was just a young girl who just happened to fall into this type of job, and she loved it. But she also loved being at home, collecting flamingos and Cabbage Patch dolls and everything. And she loved Dumbo and just going to Disneyland. She was just a regular kid. Who knows what she would have done as she got older? But that's what she was, and that's who she is. And I'm glad that people are still thinking about her in a good way, and I just appreciate people like you who, keep her memory alive and keep, fighting for her name to be, kept alive. I appreciate that.
As it should be. So thank you so much again. I do appreciate, Tammy, you coming on and taking time to talk to me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you too. Thank you very much.
My thanks to Tammy Walker for being on the program this week. You know what, guys? Like all of our guests, she did not have to come on, but she felt that keeping Heather's memory alive was important, as we do, and we are glad that she did come on. She also talked about some very hard topics. One of them is about internet rumors. Of course, you cannot believe everything you read online, and that is the case when people are talking about theories on the way that Heather died.
Hey guys, my name is Emily, and today I wanted to talk about the Red Shoe Conspiracy Theory, so stay tuned for that. So, if you guys didn't know what the Red Shoe Conspiracy Theory is, I believe it started with Macaulay Culkin, which is the little boy from Home Alone. He gave an interview talking about Heather O'Rourke, and he talked about all of the satanic pedophiles in Hollywood. Now, the Red Shoe Conspiracy Theory is probably one of the most disturbing conspiracy theories I've ever heard, so if you're really squeamish or sensitive, I wouldn't watch this. Heather O'Rourke was the little girl from the Poltergeist movies in the 80s. And she was also in Happy Days, I believe. So she was a really famous child actor back in the 80s. She was also discovered by Steven Spielberg around the age of 5 or 6. So apparently Heather O'Rourke had died from septic shock, which was due to a medical condition that she had since she was born, which was congenital stenosis of her lower intestine, or like her bowel. Apparently she was filming on the set of Poltergeist 3, and she was rushed from the set to the emergency room. She just died, and they claimed it was septic shock. That's what they told her mother, and that's what the press knew. However, many believe that this is not the reason why she died. Now, this information I'm about to tell you, I read from a source that claims to be an anonymous celebrity lawyer, in that he basically writes about these things that celebrities tell him, but anonymously. So we don't know which celebrity it is, we don't know which celebrity they're talking about, but they claim that this happened in the 80s. And from what I can tell, this honestly sounds like Heather O'Rourke that this person is talking about. So supposedly back in the mid-80s, it was the prime time for molestation amongst Hollywood. So like Hollywood pedophiles was a big time in the mid-80s. And this is around the time that Heather O'Rourke had died. So this actress claims that there was this game show she was working on as a child. And these directors and producers in Hollywood are usually and often pedophiles. So they love to work on children's shows. They love to work with children. And this game show was kind of like a new hot game show for like children and tweens. They had a lot of children coming in and working on it. You know, their parents wouldn't really be on set. So they would basically film for a couple hours every day. And the rest of the day they had free to sadly abuse these children. And she was saying she was amongst these that were the victims being abused. And there was a particular particular episode where they had a very special, cute, young, new guest star, and they were really excited to see her. She was young, fresh, cute, and like they were always looking for somebody new and young and fresh and cute. To me, this kind of sounds like Heather O'Rourke. She was 12 at the time. She was super, super young. Heather O'Rourke, of course, is very cute. It just sounds like this could be Heather O'Rourke. She was basically claiming that this young girl, this new girl, was coming and basically filmed the episode, and afterwards they would kind of raid these children on the set. They would have these grown men, producers and directors that were pedophiles, sitting in the audience watching these children come out in kind of provocative wear, I guess. And she says that this young girl came out in a bikini and she was kind of putting on a show for the directors and the producers. And then like a couple of the directors and producers or people that were working on set that were pedophiles took her off somewhere, did Lord knows what to her, and the medic had to come and they rushed her to the emergency room, which she was later pronounced dead, and that her parents were just gave some BS story and the press was just gave some BS story. So this kind of sounds like Heather O'Rourke. Heather O'Rourke was working on the set of Poltergeist 3. She was also filming a lot that day that she died, and she died from septic shock. She could have died from septic shock. However, she was really young, and I'm not sure how common it is for somebody who's really young to die from such a condition. Also, this was in the mid-80s. Heather O'Rourke was young and cute. The person that said this claims that this little girl, she believes, was also being molested from the age of 5 or 6, which was around the age that Heather O'Rourke was discovered by Steven Spielberg. I don't know about you, but it kind of sounds like this is what actually happened to Heather O'Rourke. Now, to actually tie this into the Red Shoes conspiracy, I'm going to talk about Macaulay Culkin, which, like I said, was the little boy who was the actor in Home Alone movies. And he gave an interview in Paris, France, I believe in December 2017, and he basically says that Hollywood is run by a bunch of satanic pedophiles, one of which had killed Heather O'Rourke and made shoes out of her skin. Now, as awful as this sounds, this is a story that he gave. He said that while working on the set of Home Alone 2, one of the producers had called him into his office privately, and he was talking about he was going to be such this big star and he can make him like the biggest teenage star in history. And, you know, he wanted to become his guardian, and he wanted to really mentor him. And Macaulay Culkin says he looked at him very suggestively, literally pulled out a crack pipe and gestured towards his bad area. And Macaulay Culkin said to him, "Dude, I'm 11. The guy was still coming on to him, talking to him suggestively, looking at him suggestively. And Macaulay Culkin kept saying, like, "Dude, I'm 11. Now, Culkin said that the producer knew that he was intimidating him and kind of gestured down towards his shoes and told him that the finest leather known to man is leather that is made of human skin. Culkin said he got so disgusted, especially because after this, the producer asked him if he remembered Heather O'Rourke. Culkin claims that when these Hollywood pedophiles, you know, murder these children, that they like to take their skin and make trophies out of them, which would mean that his red leather shoes were made out of the skin of little Heather O'Rourke. I know it's very disturbing and it seems like it's very hard to believe, but there are pedophiles in Hollywood. You know, you got to think about all of the people that have talked about pedophilia in Hollywood.
I can tell you that the number one problem in Hollywood was and is and always will be pedophilia.
Nobody talks about pedophilia.
It's the big secret.
The Disney stars that claim to be victims, why would anybody make that up? Why would anybody claim to be a victim of that? It just doesn't sit right with me. And I feel like they honestly might have accidentally killed Heather O'Rourke by abusing her a little bit too hard. Those shoes really might have been made of her skin, which is awful and inhumane. And supposedly during the time that Macaulay Culkin gave this interview, the French news media kind of went viral, and this was everywhere in France. However, after a couple of hours, this just was nowhere to be found. This interview he gave all of a sudden blew up, as it would, you know, because that's just crazy that a child star is going to claim that there's all these satanic pedophiles running around Hollywood and one of them skinned a child and made shoes out of them. And after a couple hours, everything was taken off the internet. You couldn't find his interview anywhere. You couldn't find articles about his interview anywhere. It's really hard to find the information about this. You gotta wonder why. Like, you think, like, if somebody claims something that big, it would be everywhere, right? And you'd be like, oh my god, is this for real, or has he gone crazy? You know, he had problems with drugs. You know, you would think like they would try to discredit him, or, you know, maybe the public would be freaking out, but no, they kind of just erased the whole thing. The media got rid of everything.
Heather O'Rourke was killed by Hollywood pedophile ring. It opened, quote, "A prominent Hollywood entertainment lawyer claims that Poltergeist child star Heather O'Rourke was raped and murdered by Hollywood executives." Heather played the character Carol Anne Freeling in all three of Steven Spielberg's Poltergeist films. She died in 1988 at the age of 12 from intestinal stenosis, a severe bowel obstruction. In an interview with Hollywood gossip website Crazy Days and Nights, an entertainment lawyer claims that Heather was anally raped on the set of a TV show called Rocky Road, which led to her untimely death. End quote. This is what social media users saw. The New Punch article is based on another article that is based on the blind item. The intermediate article titled, "Was Heather O'Rourke of Poltergeist killed in a pedogate cover-up?" opens. Quote, "With the recent allegations of sexual abuse coming out in Hollywood, pedogate is seeming more and more real. I have been following this story with interest since the WikiLeaks during last year's elections with a mix of horror, belief and disbelief. Whether this is a highly organized ring of pedophiles or just some bad apples is a hot debate, but when you mix money, power and international fame, things tend to get messy. I have a rather sad story to discuss today, and this is the death of Heather O'Rourke, the little girl who played Carol Anne Freeling in all three Poltergeist films. Heather was also quite famous during the 80s as she had parts on multiple hit TV shows such as Webster and Happy Days." End quote. The blind item was published on November 9, 2017 by crazydaysandnights.net, a long-running Hollywood gossip site. It relates what another actress, who was 12 or 13 at the time of O'Rourke's death in 1988, purportedly said she witnessed on the set of a television sitcom. This account began with the claim that the soon-to-be-dead child actress was paraded on the stage while producers pleasured themselves. Quote, "They brought her out and the front 4 rows of this theater were filled with guys who were already rubbing themselves. The girl was wearing a bikini. The show took place around a beach just so they could make these girls wear next to nothing. They had her walk around under the lights. The lights were focused on her and she couldn't really see out to the audience. She was squinting. It must have been blinding for her. They had her walk back and forth. Then they had her start dancing." End quote. The killing allegedly happened when 3 of the guys took her to a different area of the studio. Quote, "The actress didn't see what happened, but about 45 minutes later, one of those 3 guys came running out and needed a set medic. Apparently they had inserted something inside the girl and things were bad. The medic came and the ambulance came. The parents of the girl were told some crap story. That crap story ended up killing the girl because the parents believed the executives." End quote. At the end, the identity of the actress was revealed as Heather O'Rourke. crazydaysandnights.com makes it clear in a disclaimer that the blind items could be fiction. Quote, "Crazy Days and Nights is a gossip site. The site publishes rumors, conjecture, and fiction. In addition to accurately reported information, certain situations, characters and events portrayed in the blog are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Information on this site may contain errors or inaccuracies." End quote. Here is why the original blind item could not be true and how the New Punch rewrite of it is even more wrong. Heather O'Rourke's death at the age of 12 is well documented because of a medical malpractice lawsuit her parents filed against her doctors for misdiagnosing the condition blamed for her death. She died in Children's Hospital and Health Center in San Diego on February 1, 1988. People magazine interviewed Heather's mother Kathleen O'Rourke Peel months later as she filed the lawsuit against the doctors. She said Heather was at home in Lakeside, California, the day before she died, not Hollywood, where the blind item claims Heather collapsed and died, 120 miles away.
Were you surprised when you saw all these accusations of harassment in Hollywood?
Was I surprised? I wasn't. I was shocked, but I wasn't surprised. Because if you have peripheral vision, you're going to sense these things out of the corner of your eye. You can't not know that this has been going on rampantly for, I can't even tell you how many decades, but this is something that is being dealt with today.
Today, we're going to go visit the final resting place of a little girl who starred in all 3 Poltergeist movies and passed away at the age of 12 years old. Strawberry Shortcake has a message for us. We're headed to Pierce Brothers Westwood. That's the same cemetery where Marilyn Monroe and Dean Martin and Burt Lancaster, they're all buried there as well. So if you enter through the little hidden alleyway that most people miss and you're driving in, there's only one entrance in here, so you're either going to come from straight ahead or from the left here. But when you drive in to find Heather, she is right straight ahead right there. Over here you have people like Don Knotts. Then you follow it right over to here. And on the wall you see people like Jackie Collins right there. Right at the very bottom, beloved Carol Anne. Heather O'Rourke. I mean, she became a pop culture icon from her lines, "They're here," and "They're back." But she was actually a pretty accomplished little actress. She had 6 nominations for Young Actress Awards and actually won one of them. And she was discovered by Steven Spielberg. She was 5 years old, and it was in the MGM commissary. Her older sister was booked on a project called Pennies from Heaven, and Heather and her sister and her mother were eating in the commissary, and Steven Spielberg saw her and called her in for a screen test. Now, I've heard 2 different variations on this. One was that he liked her so much he signed her the next day for Poltergeist, but then I've also heard that he saw her and wasn't quite convinced, and that someone said, "No, you should really see her again. You should really see her again. There's something about her." And when he saw her again, he decided to make her scream over and over and over again until she cried. And that was when he decided that she was the perfect actress for this part. You can see December 27th, 1975 to February 1st, 1988. Now, she was also on Happy Days. I mean, a handful of episodes of Happy Days, and there's a rumor that they say that she, or her spirit, lingers around the soundstage that they filmed Happy Days on. I worked that soundstage. I never heard anybody mention that or tell that tale when I was on there, so that was news to me. But she did quite a bit. I mean, she starred in Poltergeist, and she's the conduit in Poltergeist. She's the person that the entities contact, so she's very integral. And in fact, she's in all 3 movies. Even the stars of the movie, Craig T. Nelson, Jo Beth, didn't come back for the 3rd movie, and yet she did. And what's sad is that, you know, she was a great little girl. One of the reasons they said that everyone loved to work with her is that, for one thing, she was a great expressive actress. She had these, you know, this great look and these expressive eyes, but she could also memorize a script extremely quickly. And she ended up, after Poltergeist, she was on Webster, and she did some commercials for Rainbow Bright, and she was on Our House and various other things, but I think she will always be known as little Carol Anne from Poltergeist. Heather really deserves a lot of recognition for changing her family's life. They were living in a trailer park in Anaheim, and with her success, they ended up buying a house in Big Bear. Heather was the head of her 5th grade class, and then the family eventually moved down to San Diego, which is where Heather was when she passed away. Heather actually beat out Drew Barrymore for this role. Drew Barrymore was up for the same part, and they went with Heather, and then Drew was signed on to E.T. In 1987, Heather O'Rourke and her family went on a camping trip, and they said that she got a virus or a parasite from the water and got really sick. One day she woke up and her legs and hands were swollen, and so they took her to the hospital and she was treated, and they thought that they had that under control, and then she was still sick. So Then the doctors thought she had Crohn's disease, so they were treating her for Crohn's, and they put her on steroids. So when you see Poltergeist 3, you'll see that her cheeks are really swollen. They said that she was really sick during the filming of that, and that's why her cheeks were so puffy. And so they treated her for Crohn's for a while, and then took her off that medication, and she felt better, she thought. And then one day in 1988, January 31st, 1988, she woke up and was really sick, and they called the doctor, and the doctor said that it sounded like the flu, and to basically, if she was still sick in the morning, to call him. And so when the morning came and Heather came downstairs, she said she wasn't feeling well and was short of breath, and then passed out, and was vomiting, and then passed out. So they called the paramedic to come, and when the paramedic came, they took her, and she had cardiac arrest in the ambulance, and then eventually passed away at the hospital. Now what's really sad is that they said this was congenital, so this was something that she was born with and never knew. What ended up killing her was that she had congenital stenosis of the intestines, which meant that she had a narrow intestine. So she ended up dying of a bowel obstruction. At the age of 12 years old, Heather O'Rourke was unfortunately gone, and now she rests here in a star-studded cemetery, fitting for her, right next to the likes of Mel Torme right here, and Truman Capote and Jackie Collins. Now, an interesting story that I heard was that she was a collector of Cabbage Patch dolls. She loved Cabbage Patch dolls and had a pretty huge collection at her house, and her family kept these. And then in 2015, I read somewhere online that they began selling some of these to fans. And one of the stories was that a fan that bought them said that they were having, once they got one of these dolls, they started having all kinds of bizarre occurrences. They didn't know if it was like a bad luck thing that she didn't want her dolls sold, or what it was, but they did say that they had a string of very odd occurrences once they took possession of one of her Cabbage Patch dolls. Heather O'Rourke not only was in Poltergeist, but she also appeared in Fantasy Island, many episodes of the Happy Days like I mentioned, Chips, Webster, and the new Leave It to Beaver. Even though she only made 3 movies that were released in theaters, she also made a made-for-TV movie, and it was with River Phoenix. I read that on set, Steven Spielberg was extremely courteous of Heather's age, and one of the things that he would do is if he thought that a scene might be too much, it might scare her or it might scar her, he would have a stunt double come in, or in one case where they were kind of showing a child abuse act, he only had her do the scene one time and just kept the cut and didn't make her do it again. Now what's sad is that I found an interview when I was kind of trying to find out more, and it was Heather's sister saying that now there are all these rumors that have been spread that, you know, with all the child abuse scandals and everything, that that Steven Spielberg abused Heather O'Rourke, and she said flat out that that was not true, and that she hates that these rumors are out there, and that she wanted to dispel that any of that would ever have happened. So I'll include it here as well. Heather's famous line in Poltergeist, "They're here," is listed in the 100 most memorable quotes of all time from any movie on the American Film Institute list. Rest in peace. They even put Carol Anne Freeling, Poltergeist 1, 2, and 3. Don't you almost think they should have put "She's Here"?
In 2001, Meryl Streep sent Steven Spielberg an exorcist after his home became haunted. Turns out the 68-year-old actress is quite the paranormal hack after she revealed she helped director Steven Spielberg rid his home of an unwanted spirit. When she worked with Spielberg on the 2001 film AI, Artificial Intelligence, the two had a meeting as Streep recorded her dialogue at Spielberg's Long Island mansion. But before long, chat strayed from that of her character, the Blue Fairy, and turned to spookier matters. her boss's haunted home. All we did was talk about how his house was haunted, and did I know a Ghostbuster? And of course I do, so I sent him an exorcist. Of course Meryl Streep knows a Ghostbuster. Cannot confirm nor deny said Ghostbuster was Bill Murray. Turns out her aide was welcomed, and she added, "Everything is clear down there now." The ghostly interaction was briefly first mentioned by Streep in December when she said she got Spielberg, age 71, a priest, to help exorcise the house.
Poltergeist was one of the most storied productions in Hollywood history. In fact, it's often called the most cursed film set of all time because of what happened to so many of its stars after the movie hit theaters.
They're here.
But even during the making of the now classic movie, there were enough real-life scares to justify that reputation. Let's take a look at some of the freakiest things that happened behind the scenes of this haunted house favorite. Coincidental cast deaths. Perhaps the most enduringly buzzy aspect of the Poltergeist movie legend is that so many of its cast members, including 2 of the child stars, died unexpectedly after the film was released. The first instance happened when Dominique Dunne, who portrayed Dana in the original film, was strangled to death by her ex-boyfriend in the driveway of her home in 1982, at the age of just 22. Then, in 1988, child star Heather O'Rourke died at the age of 12 from cardiac arrest after experiencing septic shock from a congenital bowel obstruction. She completed filming on the 3rd installment of the Poltergeist franchise a few months before her unexpected death, but the film had yet to be released at the time. Although other cast members would later perish from more natural causes, the expiration of the film's 2 young actresses caused many to speculate that their involvement with the supernatural movie had something to do with their untimely demises. Creepy clown attack. Before Dunne and O'Rourke's deaths, there was another eerie incident which nearly claimed the life of one of the Freeling children off-screen. Actor Oliver Robbins, who portrayed the middle child Robbie, was actually strangled by the very animatronic clown that tormented his character so in the film. If it weren't for the intervention of producer Steven Spielberg, he's not sure what would have happened to him. Nothing good, probably. As Robbins recalled, the way they shot the sequence, they didn't really have the special effects the way they do today. So the clown doll had this extended arm, and they had me act backwards. The contraption caught around my neck. Steven saw that, probably in the video assist deck, and he pulled me away from it. Who knows what might have happened otherwise? It was very fast. Maybe I wouldn't be here today. As if that demonic clown wasn't already scary enough. Real skeletons. Achieving authenticity in a Hollywood production can be tough, especially in the sci-fi horror realm. But this might be taking things a little too far. You know the scene when the Freeling mom is thrown in the muddy pool and all these corpses start to float to the surface around her, causing her to scream and freak out? Well, if that reaction seemed especially realistic to you, there may be a reason. Actress Jo Beth Williams revealed during her Reddit AMA, "When we were shooting, I thought the skeletons were fake. I thought the prop department made them. But later I found out they were real skeletons bought very cheaply. That really grossed me out." Talk about suffering for your craft.
Moved the cemetery, but you left the bodies, didn't you? You left the bodies and you only moved the headstones!
Haunted homes. Williams experienced a series of frights in her temporary home during production on the first installment as well. She said in her AMA that the picture on her apartment wall kept shifting while she left to shoot the movie, but she later decided it was her own fault for slamming the front door. That's still just her theory, but hey, whatever helps her sleep at night. Meanwhile, author James Caan, who was writing the novelization of the movie, also experienced a case of the heebie-jeebies at home. A lightning bolt struck his building as he was finishing up the project and blew the facing of his air conditioning unit across the room, which struck him in the back. After that, the lights came back on and his video games started playing themselves. And director Gil Kenan had perhaps the biggest case of shivers surrounding Poltergeist while filming the 2015 remake. The house he rented for production was the site of some minor inexplicable phenomena, like lights flickering on and off for no reason, and other equipment only working in certain portions of the property. He explained on his own Reddit AMA, "The house that I rented during filming was straight up legit haunted by a female spirit dressed in black, and I became aware of her within the first few days of staying in the house. And only after I left did I receive a call from the previous owner, who had moved back in and was terrified by the goings-on in the house, and wanted to see if I had experienced any of it. She definitely was there. It didn't follow me back to Los Angeles, but it followed me from set back to where I was sleeping during filming." If that story was just some elaborate marketing ploy, it worked, because there are plenty of people who fully believe there was something otherworldly going on with the Poltergeist movies.
How do you know that? Because I am smart.
On-set oddities. Poltergeist 2 star Will Sampson, who was a real-life shaman and portrayed Taylor the Medicine Man in the sequel, performed an actual exorcism on the set of the film to rid the site of alien spirits. He died a little over a year after the film's release from complications associated with a heart and lung transplant. And during filming of Poltergeist 3, actress Zelda Rubinstein was troubled by a photographic light blur that occurred during a photo session of the actress, leading her to believe that the pic was taken at the exact moment her mother passed away. The production of Part 3 was also an explosive one, as a garage that was to be used for filming caught fire after plastic fake ice poured onto prop cars ignited into flames and injured 3 crew members. A fire chief responding to the scene told the Los Angeles Times, "A ball of fire chased everyone out there. There was black smoke all over the place. This was all supposed to be done with the best of taste, but somehow it got away." The cause of the mishap, he said, was unexplained, since the crew on set were amply prepared to pull off the shot correctly when they began working that night.
I know, but there are many dangers you must consider, Steven.
Sounds like the choice to use real-life skeletons came back to haunt everyone involved in this franchise.
Heather O'Rourke, who played her daughter, committed suicide, or was killed by some strange thing happened there. They said that she died from, bad flu. But I think she was tortured by her father. I think.